It's time for Stockton Alive with your host, Nate Knodt.
Good afternoon or good evening. We're on the air with our second live show. Originally, we were going to be a taped version tonight of what we discussed last Monday night, but I have a conflict with the Mother's Day weekend, so therefore I thought I would just come in and do a second show tonight. I want to thank the staff here for a wonderful little theme song, by the way. You've kind of got a train sound chugging the show right into the station, and then as we get off the train and walk into the grand, obviously an Art Deco station, I'm assuming, there's a little kind of almost like a Dixieland or swing type of beat there, so I'm really grateful for that. Yes, you're on the air with Stockton Alive, ! And your host is Nate Knodt. This is the first radio show I've hosted in about 37 years, so for those of you fairly good at math, yes, I'm very old, but I'll do my best to give you a show with some interesting information, innovative discussion, and energy and oomph. That's why I always aim for energy and oomph. I do the best I can on that. I didn't show you last week the tools I bring with me for this show. Unlike Rush Limbaugh, who brags about tying his hand behind and brain is behind his back, I like to bring the full package myself. So in along that lines, I have my trusty guide, the World Almanac, maybe the greatest man-made inspired book ever written. Although I accidentally left my 2017 version back at RTD today, and I've got my 2016 version if I choose to use it. And I'll talk a little bit about Pacific again. There was a couple things I didn't finish talking about last show with the Civic Auditorium, our great quirky building downtown. So, of course, I have my Pacific Media Guide from 2003-2004, which has all kinds of facts and figures and statistics in it about Pacific. Not just basketball, it also has other sports in there. Of course, we have to talk about the fact that we need people to join our radio station and to help us get our tower up. But I won't talk too much about any money or fundraising today. I want you just to enjoy the show and not put you under a lot of pressure and not seem like we're doing a national NPR sale-a-thon today. I'll talk more about that another time. And I've got my cup of coffee over here. A good broadcaster always needs some kind of liquids to make sure you keep the voice lubricated. Last week I was worried I could fill the full air with my remembrances of Stockton. Well, that wasn't really too difficult. And I was coming off a flu bug, and I didn't think my voice would make it through the whole show. Well, I think it actually got stronger as we went. So in any event, to repeat what the show is about is that Stockton Alive is to talk about the past, present, or the future, whatever we're deciding we want to talk about on that day, but it's about Stockton. And I'll probably emphasize central downtown Stockton more than the rest of the city from time to time. But it's about Stockton, it's about San Joaquin County, it's about the Central Valley. Three really great areas that certainly do not get their due from either the public at large, the media, or our elected leaders, or our capitals in Sacramento or Washington. Nobody gives this town the fair shake that it deserves. We are, and depending on which World Almanac or which projected population you're looking at, we're the 62nd or 63rd largest city in the United States. And we're very large within California also, although California, of course, with nearly 39 million people, has a lot of high population cities. But still, we do rank right up there. And we're right there with Pittsburgh and St. Louis and several other major cities that people don't. I forgot. Cleveland's another one. There's a lot of Pittsburgh. There's a lot of big cities we're near in terms of actual city limits population. Now that's a little deceptive because if you take the urban areas, some of these places approach 1 to 2 million. If you take Stockton's urban area, we're more like around 550,000 or so, depending on how. If you take San Joaquin County, we're at about a 720,000 population. But we're growing, and we're moving right ahead. The other thing, of course, I have me with my multiple pens so I can color code my notes. And I'm I'm kind of known as an obsessive compulsive, so somewhere I probably have my whiteout bottle with me, but I don't see it right now. But hopefully I won't need to correct notes while I'm talking to you folks. Last week I kind of had a serious look on my face most of the time. Having not hosted a radio show in 37 years, I kind of forgot that we're actually visual too here. Radio, in 1980 when I last broadcast a show, radio didn't have live streaming cameras. That's something relatively new. So we're kind of what's known as a simulcast. We're a combination of live. We're a combination of totally live. Well, we're not pre-taped, of course, but when we're broadcasting, we're live radio, audio, and video television, with the emphasis mostly on radio. We're not going to try to kill you with too many visual graphics, but I will, try to be a little more pleasant about smiling and showing you things from time to time. Now, as I mentioned, last show was primarily about my personal remembrances of downtown Stockton, and the reason that was done was because one of the reasons I'm doing this show is because in a handful of events I've been involved with lately, I was asked to speak about my memories of downtown Stockton. We're speaking the early 60s here, by the way, because, again, I'm a very old person. And at these forums where I did this, it was so popular, everyone said that I should make these things more available to people at large. And one thing led to another, so here I am at KXVS, the voice of Stockton, with Stockton Alive. And the first show was intended on purpose to be about my memories of downtown Stockton. One of the things I talked about a little bit, but I didn't really finish a couple of the major things I want to say, and this is because it's so quirky and unusual that it needs to be mentioned, because it's remarkable and because it probably won't happen again. It's too bad that some handful of quirky things don't really remain longer than they do. And one of the things I was talking about last week was that I loved going to basketball games at the Stockton Memorial Civic Auditorium. That used to be the home of Pacific basketball, Delta College basketball, the Stag High School tournament, and quite a few high school games and tournaments were held there. Unfortunately, I don't know if basketball will ever be played there again. But let me tell you some of the reasons why the Stockton Memorial Civic Auditorium was so spectacular for watching any kind of basketball game, but particularly a University of Pacific Division I college game. And Pacific played the game at a very high level when they were in the Stockton Memorial Civic Auditorium, which, by the way, the building dates back to about 1925. I'll get that. By next show, we'll have that date. But most importantly, what I wanted you to know was, I mentioned that had a lot of people crammed into a small area. Well, let me give you a brief idea of what I'm talking about. The official seating capacity of that building is 2,901. And if you've never been inside the Stockton Memorial Civic Auditorium, what you should know is that the building is primarily one huge balcony that goes about 3/4 of the way around the building. And then below that's a wooden floor. But for basketball and for most events, what you see it used for today is usually dinners and banquets are there, and they have kind of this tent umbrella thing that hides the entire upper deck. But for basketball, most of the people sat in the balcony, but they did have rows of risers with metal folding chairs on both sides of the court. And then they had risers and chairs on the stage, because there's a stage at one end, because it's really a performing arts building is what it was really originally designed for. Kind of a music auditorium, too. And the acoustics there are fairly good. There's some debate about that. But generally speaking, shows that have a music quality are usually pretty good in there. And then what Pacific did was they used to cram 3,400 into that. That's 500 above the official built-in seating capacity. Well, they had risers on both sides of the floor that came right up to the court. And then they had the bleachers in the risers. Actually, it was chairs, I believe, but risers on the stage. So they had actually mini constructed stands on the stage. And then crammed between the stage and the lower deck seats was the Pacific Pep Band. So the Pep Band was practically breathing down on the ball players right on the court, which they pretty much still do at the Spanos Center, but it's not quite the same. Have to have my Mario Rubio movement there, Marco Rubio moment, where I had something that was distracting me on the floors. Had to get that. Anyway, now that's taken care of. Here's what makes the Civic Auditorium so amazing. Okay, I kind of tried to describe to you how they crammed all these seats in there. Well, it didn't come without some really unusual quirkiness. First of all, the court, the balcony came around in a semicircle. The corners of the balcony actually overhung the corners of the court. The balcony is only about 9 feet. The lower edge of the balcony is only about 9 feet above the floor. That's remarkably low. Anywhere you go, if you see a second deck or something, it's usually 15, 20, 25 feet above. This one's 9 feet. So picture this, a 6'5", 6'7" basketball player running towards the corner, trying to save an out-of-bounds pass or trying to catch a pass, leaping in the air. They literally while flying through the air, could hit their head on the balcony. And that's because the balcony was in the field of play above the corner of the court. So that's number one. Number two, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard of for Division I college basketball. The risers with the seats on both sides of the court were so close to the court that during the course of a game, there was a red dotted line 1 foot inside the regular out-of-bounds spot on the court. When you inbounded a ball from either side of the court during the course of a game, you actually stood inbounds inside the out-of-bounds line, but behind the red dotted line. I have never seen that on any other court anywhere in America. But that just shows how close the fans were. The balcony starts 9 feet above, and the people are sitting there screaming down on the players. And on the sides, you have the seats within 8 inches of the outer bounds. If you talk about diving into a crowd to get a basketball, that was literally true at the Civic Auditorium. Then if that wasn't enough, think about the background for shooting free throws. On one end of the court, you had a balcony. Remember, it's 9 feet above the ground now. And the balcony was a decorative, a frieze, I think you call it, a decorative frieze. It was about 1.5 feet tall. Well, that was right above and behind. I'm sorry, it was right behind and somewhat below the level of the rim if you're shooting a free throw at that end of the court. And the balcony was only about 4 feet behind the basket backboard. Then on the other end, if you were shooting a free throw, you were facing a frenzied crowd of people screaming from these temporary risers on the stage. So that was just the shooting background of the Pacific Memorial Auditorium was very difficult. In 1970, Sports Illustrated magazine actually said that the Stockton Memorial Civic Auditorium is one of the 10 toughest places to play in all of Division I college basketball for the visiting team. Now, for the last thing to tell you about this, the visiting team's locker room was in the basement. My understanding was there was not a great effort to make that locker room all that really spectacular, and it wasn't lit up all that well. But the most joyous thing about the locker room for the visiting players was they had to come up a steep stairway. So you're chugging yourself up the stairs. You're 6'5", 6'7", whatever. You're a tall player normally. After you climb this long flight of stairs, when you get to the door itself, the door frame was only 5 feet 10 inches tall. So if you were below 6 feet tall, after climbing up a stairway, you had to duck under the door frame or you'd bonk your head on it. And you could fall backwards and take the whole team with you. So I hope you get an idea what a quirky play this was. And it was noisy in there. I'm not going to say Stockton fans are the noisiest fans of the world or the greatest fans or the most loyal. Attendance in Stockton is a real struggle sometimes at various sporting events. The one team that really cracked through all that was the Stockton Thunder in its early years. Had some remarkable crowds in the Stockton Arena, which is a beautiful arena, by the way. Just the opposite of the Memorial Civic Auditorium. It's a very professional arena and very nice looking and beautifully designed. But imagine 3,400 people screaming at you in a building really designed for a little bit under 3,000. And a pep band playing, of course. And as I mentioned last week, the Pacific's home record there from 1963-64 to 1972-73 under a legendary coach named Dick Edwards was 192-34. And that included a 45-game home winning streaks in there somewhere. And they sold out 4 or 5 years in a row. 3,004 is not a huge number, but it's still nice when you sell something out. If you look at Pacific playing in the A.G. Spanos Center, which is a very nice arena. I like the A.G. Spanos Center. I think it's a beautifully cozy, wonderful arena. Just big enough to be professional, small enough to be kind of intimate and cozy. But it holds 6,150, and they've sold it out maybe 10 times in 20-something years of being, 30 years of being there. For many years, Pacific drew about 3,250 or so in the A.G. Spanos Center, which is a little over half capacity. But that would sell out the Stockton Memorial Civic Auditorium. So anyway, I thought that was a big deal. And since we're on this, and I'm not going to do this, is not going to be a sports show. I'm not going to go sports all the time. But since we brought up Pacific and the Memorial Auditorium, and I talked about men's basketball last time, having some powerhouse teams in the late 60s and then the early 70s, I do want to mention the fact that and I'm going to do more research on this. I started last night, but I do want to mention Pacific women's volleyball, because Pacific was one of the dominant teams for the first 2 decades of NCAA women's championship volleyball. The NCAA actually took over the governance and management of women's volleyball in 1981. Prior to that, it had been the AIAW. I forgot exactly now what that stands for. I'll get that to you another time. But it was essentially a women's collegiate governing league. They actually tried to fend off the NCAA and eventually lost. From 1970 to 1980, it was the AIAW, I believe it was. And I think it was Association of Intercollegiate Athletic Women or something like that. But in any event, that was the official volleyball organization and some other sports. But in 1981, the NCAA took it over. And the point for you to know here is that from 1981 to 1990, Pacific was chosen to be in the NCAA tournament every single year, either as a champion of a conference or as an at-large pick. And one year when they weren't chosen, about 7 or 8 years ago, it was ridiculous. They should have been. It was their first year in the Big West Conference. It was only about 3 years ago. They took San Diego, University of San Diego instead of Pacific. And Pacific had a better record. They were finished higher in the league. They had had a higher ratings performance. The only thing, unfortunately, is they lost to San Diego twice. And somehow, some way, that seemed to make San Diego the better pick for the NCAA. But anyway, getting back to my greater point, the first 20 years that the NCAA did women's volleyball, Pacific was in the tournament. In those 20 years, and most of this came in the early years, but nevertheless, in those 20 years, Pacific was in 7 Final Fours. They were in 3 championship matches. They won the first 2 they were in. They won in 1985, 1986. What we're saying here is that Pacific was your national collegiate NCAA women's volleyball champion of the whole United States. And one of the teams they beat was UCLA. I forgot now who the other team that was that they defeated. Also of significance was in those earlier years, volleyball didn't draw the big crowds that it can draw today. And I mentioned that Stockton isn't all that great for attendance in some cases, but it was one of the early supporters, both vocally, broadcast-wise, and attendance-wise for women's volleyball. So Pacific, this is a big deal now, Pacific actually hosted the Final Four and the championship game of NCAA women's volleyball in 1982 and 1986 at the A.G. Spanos Center. In those days, that tournament was broadcast live on CBS. Nowadays, it's ESPN2 that does it, which is fine. The cable networks do a great job, and they get big ratings now. But just imagine, though, that Stockton was the host of the NCAA Women's Final Four. And one reason we were the host is because we had the dominant teams and because we then had a brand-new A.G. Spanos Center. The A.G. Spanos Center opened on September 9th, 1981 for a Pacific men's basketball game. Or at least it would open on that date. I'm not sure if it was a men's basketball game. So we were also we were the first city in the United States to ever host the NCAA tournament of women's collegiate volleyball twice. And the best thing was we won the 1986 championship at the A.G. Spanos Center on national television in front of our home fans, in front of a sellout crowd. 2 names I can give you, and I'm going to do more research. We'll have a special sports edition one day where we'll go into a lot more detail. But 2 names I want to give you that were in that era. Elena Oden was one of the great players of that time, and Jane McHugh, whom I know from being a baseball and softball coach, was also one of the All-Americans. These 2 were All-Americans in women's collegiate volleyball. And then I saw a great NCAA tournament game at Pacific. It should say match, actually, about 2004, where Pacific beat Michigan in a wildly exciting, heart-stopping 3-set match. And they then went to the Final Four. I said 2004, I'm sorry. This was about 1997. They then went to the Final Four and lost in Hawaii, I think, to Penn State, who then lost to Stanford or something like that. Actually, it might have been the year Penn State won their first ever NCAA tournament. Penn State's won 7 national championships, and Stanford has won 7 national championships. Stanford has been the dominant team of all time, being in 20 Final Fours. They've been in 15 championship matches, which they've won 7 and lost 8. I mention this because there's this UOP connection to Stanford. First of all, the first part of our program was a coach named Terry Liskovich. 1976 to 1990. And then John Dunning 1976 to 1984. Then John Dunning took over the team in 1985 when they won their first of 2 consecutive national championships with the wonderful program that Terry Liskovich built up. And then John Dunning went on to Stanford. All that Stanford success comes from a coach who spent 15 years at Pacific from 1985 to 2000. So I wanted to make sure I got some things out there. I want to mention it was just a couple years ago that the men's water polo team came within about 20 seconds of a national championship. Unfortunately, they were tied with about 20 seconds to go and lost in overtime. I believe the loss was to USC. I don't remember exactly. I think the final score was 9-8. We have some All-Americans on the team. I can't name them right now sitting here. And then we had a really great swimmer and diver named Brad Schumacher, who was a double gold Olympic champion in, I think it's, if I got my years right, the 1992 Summer Olympics. So Pacific's had a lot of great moments. For those who don't know it, the first time a human ever ran a mile in under 4 minutes, which was considered an unattainable barrier for about 40 years, was done right here in Stockton on Baxter Field at University of Pacific, which is about where there's some brick apartments now, the student dormitories. The Raymond Great Palace, I want to say, is one of the places. It's about where this field was then. And that was in, I didn't look this up, this is off the top of my head, but about 1951 or so, I believe, is when this 4-mile banner was broken. It was a British guy who did it. I think his name is Roger Bannister, if I remember right. First guy ever to break the 4-minute mile. Did it right here at a track meet in Stockton, California, on the Pacific Athletic Field. So with that, I'll move away from sports. This wasn't intended to be a sports show, but it's just, those are some memories I had that I didn't get to last week because I embellished other things, and then the next thing I knew, the time was up. Okay, what this show today is to be about primarily is Stockton as we see it today. I talked about those wonderful golden memories of the 60s, early 60s, and one of the problems we actually have in Stockton is that people look at those memories and think nothing lives up to it or equals it or can ever get there again or can ever surpass it. Well, that's all a bunch of baloney and crap, of course. You have to live for the present. I mean, this is where we're at now. But we have some great things and a remarkable number of things going on. So I'm going to start by talking about the newer nightlife that is developing, because really for a city to have any kind of a decent reputation, it has to have a nightlife. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Stockton's the greatest city in the world with nightlife yet. But the progress we've made in the last 2 to 3 years, and even in the last 9 months, is almost astounding. So let me rattle off a couple of these things that have happened. I'm going to start in the most recent and kind of work backwards a little bit. But in downtown Stockton, I mean right downtown, the very heart of the city, the Central Business District, the CBD, Weber Avenue, in that area, just in the last few months, we've got the Cast Iron Trading Company. We've got the Deliberation Room. We've got Papa Herbs. We have a place called Adriana's Kebab. And we have the new Deliberation Room. That's 5 places, I think. I think I said 5. Hopefully I said 5, Dustin. I got 5 up on my hand. I hope I counted right. But those are choices we have to go out and eat at night now, or to have a drink that we didn't have 9 months ago. That's 5 places, not 1 or 2. It's 5. Cinco. That's pretty astounding. And so far, they're all doing fairly well, by the way. People rave about the rather eclectic and unusual variety of sandwiches and hand foods and appetizers they have at the Cast Iron Trading Company. They don't have what you would exactly call a traditional menu there, but most people love it. It is very unusual meats, cheeses, and vegetables and fruits seasoned in unusual ways on not your everyday white bread exactly. It's usually rye or pumpernickel, some other unusual things. And then they have a lot of beer there in terms of craft beers and draft beers and bottled beers. Then Papa Herbs is kind of a new wave of semi-fast food Filipino restaurant right there on Weber Avenue. I should mention Cast Iron Trading Companies at San Joaquin and Weber. It's on San Joaquin about 200 feet north of Weber. It's part of the historic building, which has come back to life. I'll talk about that more in a moment. But Pop Herbs is halfway down the block on Weber Avenue next to a charter school. International Collegiate Charter School. And that has been very popular, draws in a lot of people, brings in a lot of young people, as does Cast Iron Trading Company. Adriana's Kebab, by the way, is on Weber Avenue also, and it's about a block west of what I'm talking about, pretty close to Tim Ulmer's photo shop. There's a great downtown Stocktonian. In fact, he was Stocktonian of the Year a couple years ago, and he has his shop right there, his wonderful photo shop right there in downtown central Stockton on Weber Avenue. And anyway, Adriana's Kebab serves Pakistani and other foods. Primarily, it's kebab and barbecue type meat with rice. It's got very good seasoning, and it's served with beautiful silverware settings and cloth napkins. And it has an indoor open air patio at the front of the restaurant. It's directly across the street from the old courthouse. And then you've got the Deliberation Room, which just opened on December 30th on California Street. Technically, it's 19 North California Street, but it's a half a block south of Weber Avenue. For anyone who doesn't know it, north and south in downtown Stockton is delineated by Main Street, not Weber Avenue. So as we get into the thick of the show here, time to cool ourselves down and go to our rolled up sleeves and really get to work here. To do a show actually takes a fair amount of energy, so you've got to keep things humming along as best you can. Okay, so that's downtown that I talked about. By the way, there's also Taps Bar and Grill. There's also the Fusion Boba Cafe, which is over behind the construction of the new courthouse. All fresh foods at the Fusion Boba Cafe buys wireless Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi. 3 private little dining rooms. A main interior dining room. Everything's served on real plates. And everything's fresh. They buy their food fresh daily and only for the week. No preservatives and nothing is left over. And the prices there are only $8 to $10 for most things, as is true with most of these downtown locations, by the way. $8 to $12 is usually the driving price on a lot of these things. There's also Red Orchid's restaurant on Market Street. That's only been there for about 3 years. It is a rebirth of other Filipino restaurants, and they have a great lunch buffet. In fact, their lunch buffet is ranked one of the top 25th in the entire United States of America. Right here in Stockton, right downtown, tremendous Filipino buffet, ranked one of the top 25 best lunch buffets in the whole United States by a restaurant trading magazine. So that's pretty darn impressive. And then you've got some of the classic ones that have been there for a while. Yasuyani, the Greek-American restaurant on Main Street, and Casa Flores at the corner of Weber and Hunter. Can't forget Maria's Mexican restaurant over on also on Market Street. Red Orchids is on Market Street, a half a block away from El Dorado. Bella Vista I believe, is going to be very successful in the old historic Hotel Stockton building. Bella Vista is the third attempt at that location, but this one looks like the real deal. In fact, they have their grand opening with a rooftop celebration on May 25th. So that's the next big thing downtown in terms of restaurants. I know I probably left some out. I hope I didn't. I tried to get to most of what there was. There are other places to eat downtown. I don't mean, if I left them out, I don't mean anything by it. But most of what I talked about is relatively new. That's the whole point. New or reborn. And most of them are doing quite well. Now, if you want to talk about other things going on, Franklin High School has been rebuilt in East Stockton. Edison High School is just now completing a complete rebuild in South Stockton. You've got multiple new buildings being built at the University of Pacific campus. And you've got a lot of construction and buildings that have been built up at Delta College. By the way, the Delta College baseball team was ranked number 1 in the nation for all community colleges for most of last season. In fact, they got to 28-0 before they finally lost a game. And if I remember right, the game they lost, they finally made an error or something and finally blew up something with the bases loaded after being almost perfect all year. And they got to the final championship game of the state championship in the State Community College World Series. They have just won a home playoff series this past weekend and will be home again next weekend. Unfortunately, I will not get to see them play. But Delta College has a great baseball program. Their softball team is also in the state championships. And Pacific's softball team just qualified for the postseason in the new National Invitational Tournament. So a lot of good things going on there, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a lot of other great things, but that's what I can remember that's happening right now. Now, I've talked about central downtown. I consider the Miracle Mile, where the beautiful studios of KXVS, the voice of Stockton, are located, in what is sometimes known as the Peace and Freedom Building, near the House of Shaw, just a little bit off of Pacific Avenue, near Tap Plastics. Trying to give you the location here so you can be sure to come on and drop by and leave us a donation for our new FM radio tower that we're building. Having said that, let's talk about all the things that come to life on the Miracle Mile. This is all anywhere in the last 2 to 5 years now. You've got the Ave. You've got Central. Now, those are really classy. Well, the Ave is a nightclub. Central's more of a classy restaurant with a nice bar and alcohol and a patio. And the Ave has a patio in the front. Right near us, a block away, is the Impresso Coffee Shop. It's part of what is now known as the Empire Theater, the former Royal Stockton Theater movie house. And what makes it significant is outdoor seating on the sidewalk. Inside, and it's air conditioned, you have a beautiful Art Deco lobby, beautifully redecorated to the glamour of that theater as it was in the 1940s and 50s, with nothing but locally produced goods, pastries, and coffee, which I'm enjoying right now. And then you've got Valley Brew, which has been around a while, but you have the beautiful new Take 5 music dining room next to it. And they do have an association with the University of Pacific and its many schools of music and its jazz department. You've got Werlo's practically across the street from us here, and they have live music 6-7 days a week there. Very eclectic, but a lot of swing and ragtime and blues, rhythm and blues. The Mile Wine Company, also live music about, 5 or 6 nights a week, also within about a block from here. And the Mile Wine Company, very aggressive about having a lot of local events and fundraisers, bringing a lot of people in as friends and neighbors. Then we've got I have not been in there, but there's a new nice little bar called The Mile, which is very close to here. And that's next to Gusty's Wings. And then across the street from all this, and this is up near Alder Street, is the Whiskey Barrel, which is being reborn again after some tragic difficulties with the building, which is very old. But the Whiskey Barrel as a whole has done very well. Then you've got 2 trendy new beer-type places, the Taps Barrel House here on the Miracle Mile, and I mentioned briefly Taps Bar and Grill downtown Stockton, which is in the Cineplex complex. And then also here on the Miracle Mile, you've got Coco Row, Japanese food. Downtown, I just went blank. Maybe Dustin can help me out with the name of the downtown Japanese restaurant.
Oh, I know what you're talking
about. It's a Cineplex complex.
Yeah, it's right by the movie theater.
And there's a new Subway sandwich shop there. Of course, there's Starbucks there. Mm-hmm. But then you've got, it'll pop into our heads.
Yeah.
You've got the Midtown Creperie here on the Miracle Mile. You've got the Korean Barbecue, which has a really mean, great karaoke bar in the rear most evenings.
Misaki's?
Misaki's, that's it. Thank you.
No problem.
Dustin's my go-to guy. Last week he got Bob Thomas's lifetime coaching record for me when I couldn't come up with that. So those are all, and again, it's not so much that these places are simply here. These are all relatively new. If you go back 10 years ago, almost everything I just rattled off for the last, 10 minutes or so wasn't here. Yes, there were some other places that were here that unfortunately didn't survive, but these are all new. This is what we have now. Stockton is great now. Yes, we have a long ways to go to make downtown look super vibrant and exciting. We need a lot more pedestrians on the streets. One thing the Miracle Mile has to be given credit for, it has developed pedestrians. People park centrally and or walk to it from their homes or take our Route 40 Metro Express RTD bus like I did. Whenever you see me here, I come by walking or by bus. I usually come by bus and then walk home, actually, because I live on Acacia Street, which is 19 minutes from here by walking. It's only to get here by bus from downtown on the express bus is only 8 minutes, by the way. You could not walk from my office to a parking lot, get in a car, drive here, park, and walk here faster than I can come here on the RTD Metro Express, which currently runs every 10 minutes on weekdays, 20 minutes on weekends, and 30 minutes at night. But anyway, so you have all this stuff here right now. I want you to know that. All those things I rattled off. I didn't count them, but there's 25 places so I rattled off. Most of them are new. They're new, they're trendy, they're interesting, they're vibrant, and they've got business, and people like them. Now, that's the nightlife scene. Let's talk about the more industrial things that make Stockton great. Dustin, how much time have I got left?
About 10 minutes now.
Perfect. Okay. I usually keep track of this and have a little digital clock going by me, but today I just said wing it here, and I've got my notes all over the place. In case you ever wonder when a broadcaster wants to try it, and when you're getting old and you don't want to forget stuff, you have notes that look something like this. You have written black notes, and you have red highlights, and you've got underlines. This is the page I've been reading from now. Of course, I'm going to eventually type this in my laptop, and I'll have my laptop sitting here. The problem with that, though, is if there's a technical difficulty, I have to wing it on my own. Do you realize this never fails? I don't have to reboot this. I don't have to turn it on. It doesn't require batteries or charging. All I have to do is be able to write it out with a pen to start with. And I do prefer pens, by the way. I'm left-handed, and I'll smudge pencils a little bit.
That's a play-by-play trick right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about the activities going on, and then let's talk about, there's some activities I forgot to mention. In addition to all those great restaurants and nightclubs and venues and event places, look at what we've done with the stock market. I say we, I can't take any credit for it, except I go to all the events, but the stock market is that once a month open outdoor market fair. And it's not a flea market, it's new stuff, but it's local crafts. Most recently, it's been located, is it Caldwell Park? Is that the name of the park that's over there by the Save Mart store?
Yes, sir. That's where the
Caldwell Park
stock market is.
Yes. And it had been right here on the Miracle Mile. And before that, highly successful in downtown Stockton on Weber Avenue in a location now known as the Sycamore, which is about the 600 block of East Weber Avenue. Then you've got, and these are popping up all over. My wife's done one, and I've dropped in on one, although I couldn't stay. You have these interactive art events and shows that are beginning to happen, at least one of which is every other Tuesday night, and they go from I think it's usually about 6 to 9 p.m., and they'll pick a place like the Deliberation Room or the Ave or something, and they set up they'll set up tables. You have these canvases in front of you with multicolored paints, and you have a coach who's going to give you some ideas of what to paint and coaching if you want it, and then you can paint something. And it could get posted somewhere in Stockton, by the way. It's really good. Other than that, you can take it home. You got this great souvenir piece. And there are people who probably also eventually try to sell these things. But mostly it's having fun and stress release. But it also brings great business, and it brings a lot of people together. And there's at least 3 of those going on a relatively regular basis all over Stockton. And there's one that's actually called the Adult Art something or other. I haven't been able to check that one out yet. Certainly, as part of my research for KXVS, I'll have to check out that one. But it's reputable people. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. So those are just some of the things that are happening. A lot of street fairs going on. Parades have been brought back, such as Cinco de Mayo, that had died out. July 4th parades. Many other things have come along that had been there in the 50s and 60s and 70s, faded away. Well, they're back with a vengeance. Now let's talk about some of the things that make Stockton great, that have for a long time and continue to be, and they're rock solid, and they make Stockton fairly unique compared to other cities. I mentioned last week we have an inland port, but I had run out of time, didn't say too much about it. Well, we average about one ocean-going ship, I think it's every other day, arriving or departing. That's pretty remarkable. We're 85 miles inland. But these are full-size ocean ships now with big cargo loads. And I'm going to get the statistics we're having a transportation show one day, and I'll give you way more detailed statistics. But the port had its best year for tonnage last year ever. It's a busier port than San Diego by tonnage. The only inland port on the West Coast that's busier for tonnage is Portland, which is a major port. But this port apparently generates about $4 billion a year in revenues or something like that. I'll have to make sure I got my zeros and commas right on that. And it creates something like 200 jobs directly, but 1,000 jobs indirectly. Huge impact on Stockton. And, of course, it's fostering world trade. These are all international shipments, by the way. We get steel from Vietnam for windmills. We send out cement to Asia. Fertilizer comes and goes. All kinds of great products, bricks and sometimes lumber. So you've got that. You've got the Stockton Symphony. We have a world-class symphony in Stockton, one of the oldest in the United States, and one of the very few left on the West Coast, by the way. Most cities have been unable to support a symphony. Two cities that have had a real difficult time supporting a symphony are Sacramento and San Jose. Yes, San Jose, they're in the Silicon Valley. Stockton's symphony has been able to do a great job doing as well or better than those symphonies at times. I lost track now. I think it's in its 91st year. I'll get those statistics for you. I was actually on the board of directors a few years back when they had their 85th anniversary. Of course, Peter Jaffe's been an icon in Stockton, our 6', 7' conductor of the Stockton Symphony, with the incredible sharp, witty mind and the great sense of humor. And, of course, a music maestro, a truly incredibly talented man. We've got the Hagen Museum in Victory Park. That's considered a world-class museum. But by going back to Stockton Symphony, I should say, we have an association every other year with the great musician who came out of University of Pacific and did Take Five, whose name just totally escapes me right now, Dave Brubeck. Chris Brubeck, his son, works with the Stockton Symphony to do a Brubeck festival and or some kind of interactive thing with Brubeck and his whole association of jazz musicians every other year. And they take this into the high schools and middle schools of Stockton so that kids get exposed to world-class music right there in their classrooms. And this doesn't cost these students anything. Then we've got the new Asparagus Festival, which a wonderful local promoter by the name of Tony Nicetti, because he believed in Stockton and San Joaquin County, spent a fair amount of his own money to dramatically, literally at the last minute, literally with minutes to spare, bought a lot of the frying machine that was going to get sold to Stanislaus County, where they were going to create their own Asparagus Festival. And Tony said he jumped in, bought this stuff, and set up the privately operated new Asparagus Festival, now located at San Joaquin County Fairgrounds. Way more successful than anybody thought. It drew about 75,000 the first year, and I haven't seen the numbers from this year, but I believe this year they're well over 80,000, about double what people expected it to do last year. And now that event is secure for the time being, as continuing a tradition of Stockton and San Joaquin County. The original Asparagus Festival, which started at Oak Park Regional Center out at 8 Mile Road many years ago, about 31 years ago to be exact, was in about its 10th year was considered one of the top 5 food festivals in all of California and the West Coast by Sunset Magazine. And so that continues, the Asparagus Festival. In the past, we've had horse racing. We've lost that temporarily, but I think we'll get it back. We've also started some auto racing at the fairgrounds. They did one event that drew, I think, 7,000 people and basically all but sold out the grandstand that's used for horse racing. Now, speaking of Tony Nicetti and the Asparagus Festival, he brought back the Auto 99 Speedway out on Wilson Way, and we still have NASCAR racing in Stockton. We also have dirt bike racing, midget racing, and many other things, which are generally at the fairgrounds. So those are some things we have going on that are basically world-class type events. The only reason you don't think of them that way here is because you're so close to them, you don't think about them. There's people that travel 60, 70 miles to come to a heat hockey game, by the way, at the Stockton Arena. Getting back to some of the industrial things, we're one of the industrial warehousing centers of the whole state of California. You know, we're at the crossroads of California. I'm stealing one of Manteca's slogans here. But we're at the intersection of Highway 99, Interstate 5, and we're only 45 miles south of I-80. So, and we have some east-west highways through here that are pretty important too. And we have the San Joaquin River. But my greater point is we have incredible transportation infrastructure here and actual things, not just the infrastructure, but it's being used. I already mentioned the Port of Stockton, but we also have 14 Amtrak trains a day, 8 ACE trains a day. So this is way ahead of most cities in the United States because we're not Europe, of course. That's if you did the quick adding there, I think that's 22 passenger trains a day on 4 different routes out of Stockton. We have the Greyhound. We still have Greyhound service. Now, maybe many people don't appreciate that, but most people at some point need that, and they're thrilled to have it when they need it. And then we have the Stockton Airport, which is slowly but surely growing back ridership through Allegiant Airlines, which now has 8 or 9 flights a day to 4 different cities throughout the week and is drawing in 7,000 people a month now to the airport. And then, of course, my transit district, RTD, has innovated diesel-electric hybrid buses. We actually innovated that for the whole United States of America, but I'll talk about that in another show. We now have articulated buses, the big long ones that bend in the middle that are often called accordion buses. We're the smallest city in the United States of America to operate those, by the way. Yes, we do need those. We have standing room only crowds on Route 40 at certain times of the day. And we had some huge crowds for a while on Saturdays, on weekends. So And then we have Ace Rail. I mentioned Ace Rail, but they have a state-of-the-art facility, $60 million rail maintenance facility. We have a $50 million bus maintenance facility. These are two of the most technically advanced transportation maintenance facilities in all of North America, right here in Stockton. One's on Alpine and one's on Filbert Street. So, do you think Stockton's alive, Dustin?
Yes, I do, Nate.
I think Stockton's alive, which is why we call the radio show Stockton Alive. By the way, we had a pretty good response last week. I really appreciate that. I wasn't sure how many people listen or watch the show. I was kind of shocked how many do. And so thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this show. By the way, the future shows, we're going to have guests, and we'll get into specific topics. Mm-hmm. You won't have to listen to me talk all the time. But I had to get the show off the ground and get some ideas out there to people. And, of course, we want to raise our tower, KXVS, the voice of Stockton. And with that, I think we're pretty much to the countdown here. Are we bringing up the little railroad music? There it is.
This has been Stockton Alive on KXVS, the voice of Stockton with Nate Knodt.